Vanessa's been sending you the usual 5,000 every month, right? That was the first thing my son said when he called that Father's Day morning. No, hello. No, how've you been, Dad? Just that question sharp as a nail in an old floorboard. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let us know where you're listening from in the comments. For a second, I thought I'd misheard him. The line crackled. A sparrow chirped outside my kitchen window. I looked around my small kitchen, the sunlight spilling across the checkered linoleum, the smell of coffee still hanging in the air. "What did you say, Michael?" I asked. He repeated it, slower this time, as if speaking to a child. "Vanessa's been sending you $5,000 every month. You've been getting it, right?" My hand went cold around the phone. I didn't want to sound confused. I've never liked giving people reasons to think I'm slipping. "I haven't seen a cent, son," I said quietly. "Are you sure she sent it?" Michael chuckled. But it wasn't a warm laugh, it was the sound people make when they don't want to argue. "Of course she did. She's been taking care of the transfers herself. Maybe check your account again, Dad. You probably just overlooked it." Overlooked it. That stung more than I expected. After all, I'd been a bookkeeper for 35 years. Numbers never lied to me. People did. We hung up a few minutes later, him promising to visit the next weekend, me promising to double-check. When the line went dead, the silence of my house settled around me like dust. Willow Creek was always quiet in summer. The street shimmered in the Texas heat, lawns trimmed neat, flags hanging limp. Across the road, old Mrs. Reynolds watered her roses in a wide sun hat. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower coughed to life. Life went on exactly as it always did. Only I was standing still. I walked to my desk by the window, the same one where I used to help my wife, Elaine, balance the family checkbook. The ledger sat there, brown and worn, with my fountain pen tucked inside. I opened it, the paper smelling faintly of ink and habit. The last entry was from February. Rent, groceries, utilities all paid with the pension and the modest savings Elaine left behind. No sign of extra money, no mystery deposits. I logged into my bank account anyway. The numbers blinked on the screen, neat and small. The balance was the same as always. No hidden fortune from my daughter-in-law, no generous surprise. Just the truth, simple and unkind. For a while, I sat in the stillness, listening to the ceiling fan click every few seconds. I tried to imagine Vanessa, smiling, polished, always with perfect hair, typing in a transfer that never arrived. Maybe it was a bank mistake. Maybe she'd forgotten 1 month. Maybe I was just old and paranoid. But then I remembered her voice at Christmas, light and sugary. "You should let Michael handle your finances, Dad. You've done enough numbers in your life." The way she said enough, like I'd outlived my usefulness. Outside, the mail truck rattled by. I stepped out onto the porch. The Texas sun hit me square in the face. The air smelled of cut grass and distant barbecue smoke. The mailbox creaked when I opened it. 1 utility bill, 1 church bulletin, and a flyer for a community potluck. Nothing that could tell me whether my son's wife had been lying to him or to me. I stood there longer than I should have, staring down the street. The neighbors' kids rode their bikes past my driveway, laughing. One of them waved. I waved back. I must have looked like some statue of an old man frozen in the act of remembering. That night, I made myself a simple dinner, fried eggs, toast, and the last of the coffee, and sat in my recliner by the window. The television hummed low, but I wasn't really watching. My mind kept circling that phone call, like a fly that couldn't find the open door. If $5,000 had been sent every month for 8 months, that was $40,000 missing. Enough to pay off my mortgage twice over. Enough to make a man wonder what else he didn't know. I looked around my small living room, the family photos, the Bible on the side table, the empty rocking chair that still seemed to breathe in the shadows. Elaine's chair. She used to say that money reveals character faster than time. I'd laughed at that once. Now I wasn't laughing. As the sun dipped below the trees, I picked up my ledger again and began a new entry. Not in the neat columns of rent and groceries, but on a fresh page with 1 line written across the top in careful ink. June, something's wrong. I didn't know it then, but that note would be the start of everything that followed: the suspicion, the search, the truth clawing its way back to the surface. That night I didn't sleep much. The air conditioner rattled like an old man clearing his throat, and each sound in the house felt louder than it should have. I kept replaying Michael's voice in my head, calm, confident, certain that I was being taken care of. But I wasn't being taken care of, I was being handled. The next morning, I drove into town. My old Ford sputtered but still obeyed me. After all these years, we shared the same rhythm, slow to start, steady once warmed up. The bank sat on Main Street, right across from the diner where Elaine and I used to have Sunday breakfast. Same red booths, same smell of frying bacon. Only difference was, she wasn't sitting there waiting anymore. Inside the bank, it was bright and cold. The young teller smiled, the polite kind of smile that doesn't reach the eyes. Her name tag said Samantha. "How can I help you today, Mr. Carter?" I told her I wanted to review my accounts. She clicked through the computer, nails tapping like raindrops. "We have your checking and your savings, and a third account under your name, the Henry C. Trust." I frowned. "The what?" She turned the screen toward me. "It's listed as a joint account, opened 9 months ago. Secondary holder is a Vanessa Carter." There it was, my daughter-in-law's name, glowing in blue pixels. My stomach sank like a stone in water. "I didn't open that account," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. Samantha hesitated. "If you'd like, we can schedule a fraud review, but you'll need to bring identification and proof that you didn't authorize." I held up a hand. "No need. I'll handle it myself." Back in the car, I sat for a long time, staring at the steering wheel. The morning sun had turned harsh, blinding against the windshield. My reflection looked older than I remembered, the lines deeper, the eyes duller. Maybe Elaine had been right. People show who they are when money enters the room. I stopped by the diner for coffee. The waitress, Martha, had known me for 20 years. She poured without asking, setting the cup on the counter with a clink. "You look like a man with numbers on his mind," she said. I smiled faintly. "You could say that." She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "You still writing in that ledger of yours? My husband can't even balance a checkbook." "Some habits keep me honest," I said. She nodded. "Well, the world's got too many folks who ain't." The rest of the day, I filled page after page in my ledger, every transaction, every bill, every letter I'd received in the past 8 months. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about being seen, being believed. By evening, the house had grown dim again. I sat on the porch, a notebook in my lap, watching the sun melt behind the trees. The air smelled of honeysuckle and distant rain. A few neighbors waved as they passed. From somewhere nearby came the faint chime of a church bell, 6 o'clock. I remembered the last Father's Day before Elaine died. She'd made lemon pie, said Michael was too busy to come home. "He loves you, Henry," she'd told me. "He's just chasing life." Now, I wasn't sure who he was chasing or what he'd lost along the way. When I finally went inside, the phone was blinking one new voicemail. It was Michael again, cheerful and oblivious. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in. Vanessa said you sounded a little off this morning. Maybe we'll bring dinner next weekend, okay? Don't worry about the money thing. It's all sorted." All sorted. I erased the message without replying. The house fell silent again, except for the hum of the refrigerator. I walked to the window and looked out at the yard. Fireflies flickered above the grass, blinking on and off like tiny warning lights. I whispered to the dark glass, "You think I wouldn't notice, huh?" The reflection of my own tired face stared back, steady, patient, already planning. In that quiet house on Willow Creek, something inside me shifted. Not anger yet, not even grief, just a certainty that the truth was hiding somewhere, and I was still the kind of man who could find it. The doorbell rang just after lunch. I was trimming the rosebush Elaine had planted the year Michael left for college. The blooms were late this summer, stubborn like her, slow to show their beauty. But once they did, it was impossible to look away. When I opened the door, the Texas heat followed me inside, along with 2 smiling faces. Michael carried a grocery bag in one hand and a bottle of wine in the other. Vanessa stood behind him, sunglasses perched on her head, a silk scarf fluttering like a flag of polite affection. "Surprise, Dad!" she sang out, stepping forward before I could say anything. She kissed the air near my cheek, careful not to smudge her lipstick. "We thought we'd check on you. Make sure you're not surviving on canned soup again." I forced a smile. "I manage fine. Always have. Will forced. Michael set the groceries on the counter. We brought lunch. Vanessa made her famous chicken salad. It's nothing fancy, she added, already unpacking things, arranging them neatly on my worn kitchen table. I know you like it simple. That last line had a sweetness that scratched. I stood by the sink, watching her move around like she owned the place, opening drawers, finding plates, humming softly to a song only she could hear. Michael poured iced tea into glasses, talking about work, new projects, people I'd never met. I nodded where I should, but the words felt far away. When we finally sat down, the table looked more alive than it had in months. Fresh bread, cold chicken, a little bowl of potato salad. The kind of meal Elaine would have made if she were still here. Vanessa lifted her glass. To family, she said. To family, I echoed, though the words tasted heavy. For a while, we ate quietly. The clock ticked above the fridge. The sunlight made stripes across the table. Everything looked peaceful, but something about the moment felt rehearsed, like a play where everyone already knew their lines. It was Vanessa who broke the calm. So, Michael tells me you've been keeping busy. Church, the garden, your ledger. That's wonderful. Routine is good for memory. I looked up. My memory's just fine. Oh, I know, she said, smiling too sweetly. It's just you know how the mind can play tricks at your age. Happens to everyone eventually. Michael chuckled softly, sipping his tea. She's been reading those medical blogs again. Vanessa laughed with him, the sound light as glass tapping together. I just worry, that's all. Especially with finances. You've got enough to think about. I set my fork down. Speaking of finances, I said, keeping my tone even. About those monthly transfers you mentioned on the phone, Michael? Vanessa blinked, still smiling. Oh, that again? She reached for my glass and refilled it, as if the problem were thirst. You probably just forgot, Dad. We've been sending it regularly. Right, honey? Michael nodded. Every month. Auto transfer. I even double-checked the setup. I looked from one to the other. The air seemed to thicken between us, invisible but heavy. I haven't received a penny, I said. The smile on Vanessa's face didn't fade, but something in her eyes flickered like a candle struggling against a draft. Well, banks make mistakes, she said lightly. Maybe it's one of those things. I'll call them Monday. Maybe you should, I replied. Silence spread across the table, polite and awkward. Outside, a lawnmower droned in the distance. I could smell the cut grass through the open window. Michael cleared his throat. Let's not stress Dad over paperwork. We'll handle it, okay? You just enjoy lunch. Vanessa reached over, gently touching my wrist. Her hand was cool, soft, deliberate. We just want what's best for you, Dad. We really do. I wanted to believe her. God help me. I wanted to believe her. But there was something in that smile too practiced, too careful. A smile that didn't reach the heart, only the surface. After they left that evening, I stood on the porch watching their car disappear down Willow Creek. The house felt smaller again, quieter. I could still smell the perfume Vanessa left behind, sweet, floral, with a faint trace of something metallic underneath. The night air was thick, humming with the sound of cicadas. I sat on the porch long after Michael and Vanessa's car disappeared, the porch light buzzing faintly above me. Every small sound in the dark seemed to echo a creak from the old boards, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog, the rhythmic click of the sprinkler across the street. I couldn't shake that smile of hers. The way she spoke softly, like every word had been polished before leaving her lips. The way she reached for my wrist, gentle but firm, as if staking a quiet claim. She'd always been polite, gracious, even, but there was something colder beneath the surface now. I thought about the first time Michael brought her home, 8 years ago. She'd walked into our house with a bouquet of lilies, complimented Elaine's cooking, called me Mr. Carter with that same practiced warmth. I'd told Elaine later, she's charming. Elaine, sharp as ever, had only said, charm's the sugar they use before the poison. The memory sat heavy in my chest. Inside, the house smelled faintly of their perfume and takeout containers. I washed the dishes just to have something to do, the rhythmic scrape of sponge and water a kind of meditation. When I wiped the last plate dry, the clock showed nearly 10. I took my ledger from the desk and wrote down the day's events, just like I'd done for years. Lunch with Michael and Vanessa. Conversation about the transfers. Response. Denial, deflection, observation. Vanessa's eyes flickered when confronted. I paused, tapping the pen against the paper. Then I added one more line. Begin quiet investigation. It wasn't revenge. Not yet. Just clarity. The next morning, I went to the mailbox early. A letter from the church about next Sunday's potluck, a flyer from the HOA about lawn regulations, and a bank statement. The usual. Still, I studied the envelope from the bank carefully. I slid it open with my thumb and spread the pages out on the table. Same pattern. No deposits, no transfers. I poured myself a cup of coffee, black and bitter, and stared out the window. Across the street, Mrs. Reynolds waved from her garden. She must have seen me with Michael and Vanessa yesterday. Word would spread fast in this neighborhood. Gossip traveled quicker than truth in small towns. Around noon, I called my old friend Robert Bennett. He'd been the head accountant at Michael's firm for years, a quiet, steady man who didn't talk unless it mattered. "Robert," I said, after the small talk faded, "you still have access to the company's payroll system?" He hesitated. "Technically, yes. Why?" "Because Michael said his wife's been handling my monthly transfers. I'd like to know where they've actually been going." There was a pause, the sound of him exhaling slowly. "You think she's diverting the funds?" "I don't think anything yet," I said. "I just want the truth." "All right," he replied. "Give me a few days." Quietly. "Okay." When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Purpose. That evening, the phone rang again. Vanessa, this time. Her voice was soft, syrupy. "Just wanted to say how nice it was to see you yesterday, Dad. Michael felt bad that the money thing upset you." "It didn't upset me," I said. "It just confused me." "Oh, don't worry," she said quickly. "Banks mess up all the time. We'll get it fixed. You just take care of yourself, okay?" There was a beat of silence before she added, "And please, don't stress Michael about this. He's under so much pressure already. You know how business can be." "I do," I said. Though what I wanted to say was, I also know how lies sound when they wear perfume. After the call, I sat back in my chair. The room dim except for the glow from the lamp. Elaine's photo smiled from the mantel, gentle, trusting. I wondered what she would have done. Probably prayed for patience. Me, I preferred proof. I closed the ledger and stared at the cover. The leather was worn smooth from years of use, the corners bent like old memories. I whispered, "Let's see what you're hiding, Vanessa." The next morning, I drove into town again. The air was thick with heat, and the sun glared off the hood of my old Ford like it had a grudge. I hadn't been to the office district in years, not since I retired, but I still remembered every turn. The streets had changed, though. Where there used to be a diner and a hardware store, there was now a smoothie bar and a yoga studio. Everything moved faster, brighter, louder. Everything except me. Robert Bennett's office sat on the third floor of a plain brick building near downtown Austin. No fancy signs, no glass doors, just his name etched on a metal plate beside a door that squeaked when I opened it. Inside, it smelled faintly of coffee and paper. Robert looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face before turning into a tired smile. He'd aged like me, silver hair, lines carved deep around the mouth, but his eyes were still sharp. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, standing up. "Henry Carter, thought you'd sworn off numbers for good." "I tried," I said, shaking his hand, "but it seems numbers aren't done with me yet." He laughed softly and motioned to the chair across from him. "Sit. You still take your coffee black?" "Always." While he poured, I took a look around. Same meticulous order as before, stacks of folders lined up perfectly, pens arranged by size. The kind of room where secrets could sit quietly without ever leaking out. After a few minutes of small talk, I leaned forward. "Robert, I need your help, and I need your discretion." His expression shifted from warmth to the kind of stillness only men our age know. "Go on." "My son's wife," I began. The words felt heavier than they should have. "She's been managing the transfers Michael sends me. 8 months of payments, 5,000 each, vanished into thin air." Robert's eyebrows furrowed. "You checked with the bank?" "I did. There's a trust account under my name. Opened 9 months ago. I didn't sign a thing." He leaned back, exhaling. Henry, I probably shouldn't tell you this, but it's not the first time Vanessa's name has come up around here. That caught my attention. What do you mean? She once emailed accounting, using Michael's login, to authorize a change in our payroll vendor, he said quietly. It was small, but the timing was off, came through while Michael was overseas for a conference. When I asked about it later, he brushed it off. Said Vanessa was just helping with admin work. I felt the old familiar knot tighten in my chest. And you believe that? Robert gave a half shrug. I wanted to. Michael's a good kid, but he's blind where she's concerned. I stared down at the cup of coffee between my hands. The steam had faded. I need proof, Robert. Something solid. I can't confront them on suspicion alone. He nodded slowly. I can pull the authorization logs. If she accessed anything under Michael's credentials, it'll show. But you have to give me time, and you can't let Michael catch wind of it. I won't, I said. He's not the enemy. Not yet. Robert studied me for a moment, then sighed. You know, Henry, I always admired you for keeping your head when things got ugly. You sure you want to open this box? I didn't open it, I said. They did. He cracked a small smile. Fair enough. Before I left, he reached into a drawer and handed me a business card. If things start to get messy, call this woman Amelia Rhodes. Lawyer. She's sharp, trustworthy. Lost her husband a few years back. I think you two might see the world the same way. The name hit me like a faint echo. Amelia? I know her. She handled Elaine's estate. Then you know she doesn't back down easy, he said. I slipped the card into my wallet. The embossed letters caught the light. Amelia Rhodes, attorney at law. For the first time in weeks, I felt something like movement, not victory, not relief, but direction. As I walked out into the Texas afternoon, the sun burned hot against my skin. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel and looked at the business card again before tucking it into the visor. Robert had been right about one thing. Once you start digging for truth, you'd better be ready for what comes crawling out. I didn't call Amelia right away. I sat on it for a few days, the card resting on my kitchen counter beside the salt shaker, a small rectangle of possibility. Every morning, I'd look at it over coffee, tracing the embossed letters with my thumb, wondering if I had the right to drag someone else into this mess. But the silence in my house had started to feel like company, and company was dangerous when it only told you what you wanted to hear. On Thursday afternoon, I finally picked up the phone. Her voice was exactly as I remembered, calm, steady, with a touch of dry humor under the surface. Henry Carter, she said. I was wondering when you'd call. Robert warned me you might. Did he? I said, smiling despite myself. Then he probably told you I'm in a bit of trouble. He said you're in a bit of truth, she replied, and those two things usually look the same from the outside. We agreed to meet the next morning at a cafe downtown. It was one of those quiet places that smelled like cinnamon and memory. When I walked in, she was already there, hair silvered at the temples, reading glasses perched low on her nose, a cup of black coffee half finished in front of her. She looked like she belonged there, like time had settled comfortably around her. Henry, she said, standing to shake my hand. You look exactly the same. That's either a compliment or a diagnosis, I said, sitting across from her. She laughed softly. I'll let you decide. Bend, Bester, Bendenhouf, are Willand and Kreisent. For a while, we talked like old friends about Elaine, about the neighborhood, about how neither of us liked how the world had sped up. Then, the talk turned serious. Robert told me a bit about Vanessa, Amelia said. What do you want me to do? I don't know yet, I admitted, but I need to be ready. If she's committed fraud, forged my name, diverted funds, I need a way to prove it. Quietly, without ruining my son before he even knows what she's done. To Ephes. Amelia nodded, stirring her coffee. That's the tricky part, catching a thief without setting off the alarm. But I've handled worse. Still, Henry, you have to understand, once you pull this thread, you can't unspool it halfway. I know, I said, but I can't sit here pretending I'm blind. She studied me for a moment. You always had that look, the kind of patience that scares people. I remember how you handled Elaine's estate. You never rushed, even when the paperwork felt endless. An effect first. Elaine believed rushing made people lie, I said quietly. Truth takes its time. Amelia smiled faintly. Wise woman. We spent the next hour laying out a plan. Robert would get the payroll logs from the company's accounting system. Amelia would discreetly request verification from the bank under attorney privilege. No alarms, no paper trail leading back to Michael. My job was simpler. Keep playing the confused old man. Don't confront anyone yet, she said firmly. Let them think you've forgotten. Let them relax. That's when people show their real faces. Before leaving, she slid a small notepad across the table. If you remember anything odd, calls, letters, anything she said, write it down. Memory fades, but ink doesn't. I smiled. I've been keeping a ledger since before Michael was born. I think I remember how it's done. Good, she said, because this time, that ledger might just save you. We walked out together into the fading afternoon. The air was warm, carrying the faint hum of traffic and the smell of rain that hadn't fallen yet. She stopped by her car, turned to me, and said quietly, "You're not alone in this, Henry. Don't forget that." I nodded. For the first time in months, those words didn't sound like pity, they sounded like truth. When I got home, the sun was setting behind the trees, painting the yard gold. I sat at my desk, opened my ledger, and added a new page. At the top, I wrote 3 names: Robert Bennett, Amelia Rhodes, Henry Carter. Underneath, 1 sentence. The truth doesn't hide forever, it just waits for the right witnesses. Outside, lightning flickered on the horizon. The storm was coming, and for once, I wasn't afraid of it. It was a Tuesday morning when the envelope came plain, government white, the kind that never carried good news. I found it wedged between the church bulletin and a grocery flyer. My name printed in sharp black letters, Henry A. Carter. No return address I recognized, only the faint seal of Medicare Services in the corner. I opened it at the kitchen table, the old oak one Elaine and I had bought 40 years ago. The paper trembled a bit in my hand, not from weakness, but from something colder. The letter read, "This is to confirm your recent change of mailing address to 1459 Briarwood Lane, Austin, Texas." I read it again, and again. That address wasn't mine. It was Michael's. For a long minute, all I could hear was the hum of the refrigerator and the faint creak of the ceiling fan. Outside, a lawnmower started down the block, steady and oblivious. I leaned back in the chair and stared at the letter. Someone had filed a change of address form in my name. Someone had rerouted all of my medical and financial correspondence to my son's house without my consent. And there was only one person who would dare. Vanessa. My chest tightened, the kind of pressure that isn't quite pain but isn't far from it. She'd already taken the money Michael thought he was sending. Now she wanted control of my mail, maybe to keep track of what I knew, or worse, to silence what I didn't. It was clever. I had to give her that. With Medicare, bank statements, and retirement documents going to their house, it would look like I was senile or careless. And if she wanted to, she could convince anyone I was unfit to handle my own affairs. I folded the letter carefully and slid it into my notebook. Not a word torn, not a crease out of place. Proof needed to stay clean. Later that afternoon, I called Robert. He answered on the second ring, his voice low, as if he already knew. "You sound like a man who's just read something he shouldn't have," he said. "I got a letter," I told him. "Medicare. They've changed my mailing address. To Michael's house." There was a long silence. Then, "Vanessa." "Yes." "Henry, listen to me," Robert said. "Don't call your son yet. Don't tip her off. We'll need to see how deep this goes. Let her think you're none the wiser." I rubbed a hand over my face. "You're asking me to sit here and pretend I don't know my life's being stolen?" "I'm asking you to win," he said. "And to win, you've got to be patient. If you confront her now, she'll bury every trail she left. Let her keep digging. Eventually she'll dig herself in." His words made sense, but they didn't feel good. Nothing about this did. That night, I sat by the window with the letter laid flat on the table. The porch light flickered on by itself, bathing the front yard in a dim yellow. Somewhere down the road, kids were laughing, chasing fireflies. I envied them their innocence, their smallness. I thought of Elaine again. Her voice was still so clear in my head, the way it had been that last night in the hospital. Her hand, frail but certain, gripping mine. "Protect the family, even if it breaks your heart." I'd promised her that. I just hadn't known protecting it might mean protecting it from within. The clock ticked loud in the empty house. I sat there for hours, staring at the letter as if it might change its mind, as if ink could apologize. But all it did was sit there, silent, guilty, undeniable. Sleep never came that night. I sat in my armchair long after the clock struck midnight, the hum of the ceiling fan cutting through the silence like a heartbeat that didn't belong to me. The letter from Medicare lay open on the coffee table, next to my glasses and a half-empty mug of chamomile tea gone cold. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Elaine's face. The last night in the hospital, the oxygen tubes, the faint smell of antiseptic, the way she had whispered to me through the ache of her lungs, "Protect the family, even if it breaks your heart." I'd taken those words as a blessing once. Now they felt like a curse wrapped in love. By morning, the sky had turned the pale pink of old paper. I made myself a simple breakfast, toast, eggs, a bit of jam. I couldn't taste any of it. My mind was still back in that letter, in the choice it forced on me, to confront or to wait. Robert called just as I was cleaning the dishes. "Did you sleep at all?" he asked. "Not really," I said. "I kept thinking of Elaine. She'd hate what this has turned into. She'd also hate seeing you lose everything because of pride," he said. "Henry, you've got to trust me on this. Let her hang herself with her own lies. The deeper she believes she's fooled you, the harder she'll fall." I looked out the window, watching the mail truck crawl down the street. "You sound too calm for someone sitting on a volcano." "I've seen this before," Robert said quietly. "A spouse forging access to a parent's finances, it's more common than you'd think. But I've also seen justice catch up, when you're patient enough to let it." His voice steadied me, but didn't soothe the ache. Patience might win battles, but it doesn't quiet the hurt of being deceived by your own blood. After the call, I went to my study and pulled out my old lockbox. Inside were the small relics of a lifetime: Elaine's wedding ring, our mortgage papers, family photos, and a yellowed envelope marked insurance, 1,989. I placed the Medicare letter inside, right next to those memories. If Vanessa ever wanted to rewrite my life, she'd have to rewrite all of it. The afternoon drifted by slowly. I tried reading the newspaper, but every word blurred into thoughts of betrayal. Even the crossword puzzle, Elaine's favorite, felt like an insult. Around sunset, I took a walk through the neighborhood. The air smelled of cut grass and charcoal smoke, someone grilling down the block. People waved from their porches. Neighbors I'd known for decades, unaware that my world had tilted. I smiled and waved back, a man playing his part. When I got home, the answering machine was blinking. One new message. It was Michael. "Hey, Dad. Just checking in. Vanessa and I were thinking maybe we could move your prescriptions to a new pharmacy, make it easier for you. I'll handle all the paperwork. Don't worry about a thing." His voice was casual, loving even, but I heard what he didn't say. It wasn't about convenience. It was control. I sat down slowly, pressing a hand to my chest. For a moment, I wanted to call him back, to tell him everything, to scream, to plead, to ask him if he even knew what was being done in his name. But I didn't. Robert was right. Truth needed time to surface. So instead, I opened my notebook. The pages smelled faintly of ink and dust, the scent of years that refused to fade. I wrote down every detail: the Medicare letter, the voicemail, the time, the date, and then, underlined in steady strokes, I wrote, "Truth never needs revenge, it just needs proof." When I closed the notebook, the house felt quieter, but not empty. There was something alive again, a spark of resolve I hadn't felt in years. The sun dipped low, painting the living room in amber light. Outside, the crickets began their evening chorus, and the wind rattled the branches like fingers tapping on glass. Somewhere deep down, I knew this was the calm before the storm. But this time, I wasn't going to hide from it. The idea came to me while I was sitting on the porch, watching the afternoon light spill over the grass like melted honey. The air was still, heavy with that slow Texas heat that makes even time hesitate. A cardinal perched on the fence, cocking its head as if it knew what I was about to do. It had been weeks since the Medicare letter, weeks since Robert told me to wait, and Amelia reminded me that truth reveals itself in silence. But I'd waited long enough. Now, It was time to give that silence a stage. So I decided to invite them for dinner. A family dinner, I wrote on the small invitation card. No big reason, no special occasion, just a Sunday meal like we used to have when Elaine was alive. The handwriting was neat, deliberate, each letter shaped with the patience of a man who knew he was setting something in motion. I mailed the card to Michael's office. Vanessa always intercepted casual texts. She controlled his calendar like she controlled everything else. A physical card, though she'd have to read it out loud. She'd smile, pretend surprise, and say how thoughtful it was. She'd never imagined that every word of that note was bait. That evening, I started preparing the house. I took out Elaine's old tablecloth, the white one with embroidered corners, and laid it across the dining table. It still smelled faintly of lavender, like her. The plates were from our wedding set, chipped in a few places, but still shining under the kitchen light. For dinner, I planned the same menu she used to cook on holidays. Roasted chicken with rosemary, mashed potatoes with too much butter, green beans sautéed in garlic, and her apple pie, the one she claimed could heal any wound except betrayal. As I worked, I talked to her under my breath, the way lonely men talk to ghosts. "Elaine," I said quietly, placing the silverware, "I know you'd rather I forgive, but forgiveness without truth is just surrender." Quote, the phone rang just as I finished setting the table. I didn't need to check the caller ID. "Dad!" Michael's voice carried that practiced cheerfulness of someone who hadn't called in too long. "Got your card. Vanessa and I would love to come. You sure you want to cook all that by yourself?" "I've been feeding myself for 67 years, I said, smiling faintly. "One more dinner won't kill me." As would Purdue Dove, he laughed, and for a moment, he sounded like the boy who used to follow me around the backyard with a toy hammer, fixing imaginary fences. "We'll bring wine," he said. "Don't bother," I replied. "I've still got that bottle of Chardonnay from Elaine's birthday, the one you never opened." There was a pause, soft but telling. "Right," he said finally. "We'll see you Sunday, Dad." After the call, I stood in the kitchen for a long while. The setting sun had turned the window glass to gold, and for a moment, the reflection of my face looked almost unfamiliar, harder, older, maybe even dangerous. On Sunday afternoon, I woke early to the sound of cicadas. The air smelled of earth and rosemary. I ironed my shirt, polished my shoes, and even combed back my hair the way Elaine used to like. The house was spotless. Everything had its place, like a courtroom before trial. By late afternoon, the sky turned copper, and I heard their car pull up the driveway. I wiped my hands on the apron and went to the door. Vanessa stepped out first, all smiles and perfume, carrying a bottle of wine she didn't know I didn't want. Michael followed, looking tired but happy, like a man desperate to believe everything was fine. "Dad," Vanessa said sweetly, leaning in to kiss my cheek, "you look wonderful. And this house, my goodness, you've outdone yourself." "With things not." Her tone was warm, but her eyes were scanning the place every corner, every detail, like she was taking inventory. "Just trying to make it feel like old times," I said, stepping aside. "Come in, both of you." They entered, and the smell of roasted chicken filled the air. I could almost see the nostalgia hit Michael. He smiled, soft and distant. "This smells like Mom's cooking," he said. "It is," I replied. I followed her recipes to the letter. With their Vanessa's smile flickered, just slightly, before she sat down. She wasn't expecting warmth. She was expecting weakness. As I poured the wine, the cicadas hummed outside, and the sunlight slanted across the dining table, catching the edge of her bracelet a flash of gold against the white linen. The stage was set. Dinner began like any other, or at least that's how I wanted it to look. We said grace, heads bowed, hands folded, though I noticed Vanessa's eyes never quite closed. She was watching me, always watching, as if afraid I might slip something unexpected into the prayer. The food was good, too good. Even Vanessa couldn't hide her surprise. She complimented the chicken, the pie, the tablecloth, everything except the one thing that mattered: honesty. "So, Dad," she said between bites, her smile carefully measured, "it's so good to see you eating well again. Michael worries, you know. You forget to shop sometimes." I dabbed my mouth with the napkin. "Do I?" She tilted her head, tone dripping with sweetness. "You've mentioned it before. I think it's adorable, really. We all have our moments." Michael chuckled softly, not out of malice but out of habit, the reflex of a son caught between peacekeeping and blindness. "Vanessa takes care of everything," he said proudly. "She's even been managing some of your paperwork, utilities, health stuff, all that." I nodded slowly. "Ah, yes. I've noticed she has quite a knack for that. Thank you for watching." For a few seconds, only the sound of silverware filled the air. Outside, the cicadas roared louder, as if the evening itself was holding its breath. I leaned back in my chair, watching the two of them across the table. The golden light caught Michael's face, the boy I raised, the man I barely recognized, and next to him, Vanessa. So poised, so sure she was untouchable. "Speaking of which," I said casually, "Vanessa, you've been handling the transfers to my account, haven't you?" She didn't flinch. Impressive. "Of course. Michael wanted me to. You know how tricky online banking can be these days." "Ah, yes," I said softly. "It can be confusing. Which bank do you usually send it from again?" There it was, the faintest pause, barely a breath long, but long enough. "Wells Fargo," she said smoothly, too quickly. Michael smiled. "Yeah, that sounds right. We've always used Wells." "Interesting," I interrupted. My voice didn't rise, but it carried the weight of a hammer, because I've never had an account with Wells Fargo. The room went still. Even the cicadas seemed to stop. Vanessa froze, fork suspended halfway to her mouth. Then came the laugh, soft, practiced, almost believable. "Oh, I meant the new account Michael opened for you, remember? The one for your Medicare reimbursements?" Michael turned to me, frowning slightly. "Yeah, Dad, I told you about that, didn't I?" I met his gaze, calm, steady. "You might have, son. But then again, I forget things, don't I?" He looked uncertain now, eyes darting between us. Vanessa reached for his hand, her nails glinting under the light like tiny daggers. "Henry," she said, using my name instead of Dad, a subtle shift. "You don't need to stress about these little details. We've got everything handled. You should just relax." I smiled faintly. "Relaxation is a luxury, Vanessa. Some of us are too busy remembering what others want us to forget." Her fingers tightened around Michael's. I saw it, that quick flash in her eyes, like a match striking in the dark. Fear. I poured more wine, slow and deliberate. "It's funny, though. I got a letter from Medicare last week. Said my address had been changed. To Austin." Michael blinked. "Austin? That's our address." "Yes," I said, letting the word linger. "It is. I would have Vanessa shifted in her chair. "There must be some mix-up. Those agencies are terrible with paperwork." I leaned forward slightly, resting my elbows on the table. "Maybe so. But the signature on the change form looked remarkably steady for a man who supposedly forgets to buy groceries." Silence. Michael's fork clinked against the plate. Vanessa's eyes darted down, then back up, the smile gone now. She opened her mouth, but no sound came. I let the quiet stretch 10 long seconds that felt like 10 years. Then I said softly, almost kindly, "Interesting. That's not the bank I used." And I smiled not out of triumph, but out of clarity. The kind that comes only when the fog finally starts to lift. The silence after my last words hung heavy, thicker than the Texas heat outside. No one moved. No one breathed. Michael's fork was still resting on his plate, the mashed potatoes untouched, the chicken growing cold. Vanessa sat frozen, her hands trembling slightly as she reached for her wine glass. The smile she had worn all evening was gone, replaced by the faint twitch of panic behind her lips. Then came the knock at the door. 3 steady knocks, not rushed, not hesitant. The sound cut through the tension like a blade through cloth. Vanessa jumped slightly. "Who could that be?" she asked, her voice too bright. Too fast. I didn't answer. I already knew. I stood up, slowly, letting the chair scrape against the wooden floor, deliberate, unhurried. I walked to the door and opened it. There stood Robert Bennett, in his work jacket despite the heat, holding a manila envelope under his arm. His face was calm, professional, but there was a sadness in his eyes that only an old friend could wear. "Evening, Henry," he said. "Sorry for dropping by. unannounced. I stepped aside. No apology needed, Robert. You're right on time. Vanessa's posture stiffened the moment she saw him. Her hand gripped the stem of her wine glass, like a weapon. Robert nodded politely to both of them, then turned to me. I thought we might discuss some numbers. Perfect timing, I said. We were just talking about finances. He walked to the table, placing the envelope in front of me. The soft thud of paper hitting wood felt louder than thunder. Vanessa forced a laugh. What's this? Business talk during dinner? Robert smiled faintly, the kind of smile that never reached his eyes. Something like that. Henry asked me to help him go through a few discrepancies in his bank accounts. I think I've found the source. Her fingers tightened around her glass. Really? I'm sure it's just a misunderstanding. Robert looked at me, then back at her. Maybe. But misunderstandings don't usually come with forged signatures. The room fell utterly still again. Michael looked up sharply. Forged? What are you talking about? Robert reached into the envelope, pulling out a small stack of papers. The rustle of pages echoed through the room. This is the authorization form for a new checking account under the name Henry Carter. It was opened 8 months ago at Riverbank, not Wells Fargo. Michael blinked. Riverbank? But Robert placed the top page gently in front of him. That's your father's signature, right? Or at least, it's supposed to be. Created to the playing ground. Michael leaned forward. His eyes moved across the page, then froze. The ink was darker, the loops wrong too neat, too precise. His lips parted, but no sound came. Vanessa laughed again, this time shakier. Come on, this is ridiculous. Anyone can copy a signature these days. Maybe the bank made a clerical error. Robert shook his head. We verified it this morning. The handwriting was digitally matched, and the email authorizing the transfer came from your home network, Mrs. Carter. Dullion State Haven Ald, 70. Her face drained of color. Michael turned to her, confusion and disbelief warring in his expression. Vanessa, tell me that's not true. She stammered, searching for words, eyes darting toward me, then to Robert, then back to her husband. I just wanted to help. You're always so busy. I didn't think, Robert interrupted gently. You didn't think your father-in-law would ever find out? Her breathing quickened. The air felt thick, heavy with the scent of roasted chicken gone stale. I sat back down, hands folded in my lap, watching the scene unfold like a man who'd already seen the ending. Michael finally spoke, voice breaking. You took his money? I was protecting us, Vanessa snapped, suddenly defensive. You don't know how fragile his finances are. I was keeping things organized. I looked at her, calm and steady. You weren't organizing, Vanessa. You were erasing. She opened her mouth, but no sound followed. Then I turned to Michael, whose face had gone pale, eyes glassy. You wanted proof, I said quietly. Now it's on the table. He looked down at the papers again, and his hands started to shake. Outside, lightning flashed through the kitchen window, throwing our reflections against the wall. 3 people. One truth, no more lies to hide behind. Michael sat there, his head in his hands, staring down at the papers as though they might rearrange themselves into something less damning. Vanessa was still clutching her wine glass, her knuckles white, her breath short and uneven. Robert remained standing, his presence quiet but solid, a witness to the wreckage of a family. I can explain, Vanessa finally said, her voice brittle. It wasn't about the money. It was about control. Henry doesn't know what he's doing anymore. He forgets things. Enough, I said, my tone sharper than I intended. The words sliced through her sentence like thunder. Her eyes snapped to mine. For the first time that evening, she looked small, not the confident woman who had walked into my house hours ago, but someone stripped bare. You talk about control, I continued, but what you wanted was ownership. Over my name, my trust, my family. Michael lifted his head. Vanessa, tell me you didn't use Dad's name to... I did it for you, she cried. Do you have any idea how much pressure we're under? The mortgage, the business loans, the taxes. You send money every month like we're rolling in gold. I was just trying to keep things from falling apart. Her voice cracked. I was scared, Michael. I was scared you'd lose everything. Michael's voice dropped to a whisper. And so you decided to steal from my father? Vanessa turned toward me, desperation creeping into her tone. He doesn't need it. He's retired, living alone. I stood up slowly. I earned every dollar of that money, not with greed or schemes, but with 40 years of work balancing books, saving every penny I could. Your husband sends it because he's my son, not because I begged him. And what you took wasn't just money, Vanessa. You took my dignity. Tears finally welled in her eyes, though I couldn't tell if they were for me or for herself. Robert spoke softly, his voice carrying the finality of a verdict. Henry, everything checks out. We have digital proof of the false account, the transactions, and the forged authorization forms. Amelia already submitted them to the bank's legal department. They'll contact the authorities soon. Vanessa gasped. You reported me? I shook my head. No. Robert did what any honest man would do. I didn't need revenge, Vanessa. I needed the truth. If you Kangat is up in somewhere, the storm outside cracked open with a loud peal of thunder, followed by a brief flash that illuminated the room. For a second, everything stood still, 3 lives caught in the lightning, each carrying their own version of guilt. Michael finally stood. His face was pale, his jaw tight. He looked at me, then at his wife. Vanessa, go home, he said quietly. I'll handle this. She blinked at him, disbelief spreading across her face. What? You're siding with him? Your father's manipulating you. Michael slammed his palm on the table. Stop it! Just stop! His voice cracked. He didn't have to manipulate me. He's been nothing but honest while you... He stopped himself, breathing hard. Just go. Vanessa looked around helplessly at the table, the papers, the faces that no longer believed her. Then she placed the wineglass down, so gently it barely made a sound, and walked to the door. She paused on the threshold, her voice trembling. You'll regret this. I didn't look up. No, Vanessa, I already have. The door clicked shut behind her. Silence again, except for the storm easing into rain. Michael sank into the chair across from me, his face buried in his hands. Dad, I'm so sorry, he whispered. I should have known. I should have protected you. I placed my hand on his shoulder, steady, firm. No, son. This wasn't about protection. It was about awareness. Sometimes we have to lose what we trust to see what's real. He looked up at me, eyes red and wet. Can you forgive me? I took a deep breath, glancing at the scattered papers that had cost us both so much. Forgiveness isn't the hard part, I said softly. Living with the truth, that's what takes courage. The clock ticked once more, steady as ever. Outside, the rain softened into a whisper, washing the dust off the porch, off the old roses my wife once planted. Inside, 2 men sat in silence, one learning the cost of blind faith, the other the weight of justice. And in that silence, I felt something break, but it wasn't my heart this time. It was the lie that had held my family hostage for far too long. The weeks that followed felt both heavy and hollow, like the house itself was breathing slower. The whisper of the ceiling fan, the creak of the old porch swing, even the birds that used to sing near the rose bushes seemed quieter, as if they too were waiting for the dust to settle. The case didn't take long to make its way through the system. With the evidence Robert and Amelia had gathered, the court didn't have much to debate. Vanessa stood there, in her pale blue dress and trembling hands, while the judge read the verdict in a voice that sounded like the grinding of an old door hinge. She was ordered to repay every cent she had stolen, all $40,000, and barred from managing any of her husband's financial accounts for 5 years. The judge added something else, something that wasn't just punishment but almost mercy. She would have to attend a financial responsibility program for adults who had abused fiduciary trust. I watched her from the back row. She didn't turn once. Not to me, not to Michael. Her lawyer kept whispering things in her ear, but I could tell she wasn't really hearing him. It was strange I didn't feel the satisfaction I thought would come. There was no victory in that room, only an ending. When the judge struck his gavel, people around me murmured, some shaking their heads, others whispering sympathy. But justice, when it's clean, is quiet. Michael caught up with me outside the courthouse. The sun was sharp that morning, glaring off the marble steps. He walked slowly, shoulders hunched as though the weight of the verdict pressed on his back. Dad, he said, his voice rough. It's over. I nodded. Yes, son, it's over. But I didn't feel like anything had really ended. It felt more like a door had closed on something that had already died long ago. Michael rubbed his temples. She's gone back to her parents' house. They won't let me near her. That's probably for the best, I said. He looked up, eyes full of sorrow. You think I can ever make it right? I wanted to tell him yes. I wanted to tell him that time could smooth everything over like rain over stone, but I'd lived too long, seen too much to lie kindly. You can live right, I said softly. That's the only thing any of us can do after wrong's been done. He nodded, and for a long moment we stood together on those courthouse steps, father and son not reconciled, not broken, just two men trying to find their footing again. When I drove home that afternoon, the sky over Texas was pale and endless, the kind that makes you feel small but somehow peaceful. My house greeted me with its familiar quiet, the scent of dust, the faint hum of the old refrigerator, the sound of my own footsteps echoing in the hallway. There was a note in the mailbox, from the church. Brother Henry, it said, we've been praying for you. Justice may be hard, but truth is never in vain. We'll have you in our hearts this Sunday. I read it twice, then folded it neatly and placed it under the old Bible on my table. That Sunday, I went to church, though I hadn't planned to. It wasn't pride that had kept me away, it was exhaustion. But when I stepped through those wooden doors, I felt something soften in my chest. The pastor gave me a small nod from the pulpit, and the congregation smiled faintly. Some came up after the service to shake my hand. Others didn't say anything, just gave that slow, respectful look that said, you did what had to be done. But there were whispers, too, in the corners, near the coffee table, by the bulletin board where announcements of potluck dinners and charity drives hung. Words like poor man and family tragedy floated around. I didn't blame them. In small towns, stories travel faster than truth. After the service, Pastor Lee approached me. Henry, he said, his kind old face folding into a gentle frown, you handled this with more grace than most could. I just wanted what was right, I replied. He nodded. Justice isn't always clean, but it's necessary. The good book says mercy and truth meet each other, but sometimes they take their time getting there. We shared a small smile. Then he asked if I'd like to say a few words next Sunday, maybe something about forgiveness, about rebuilding. I told him I'd think about it. That night, I sat by the window with a cup of coffee, listening to the crickets. Across the street, my neighbor, Mrs. Wilson, was watering her front yard. When she saw me, she waved, and I waved back. It struck me how simple that moment was, how ordinary kindness could still exist after everything that had broken. The paper had called twice that week, wanting an interview. Elderly man exposes financial abuse by daughter-in-law. They said it would be titled. I told them no. Justice isn't news, I told the reporter. It's just what should have happened. She was quiet for a while before hanging up. I leaned back in my chair, letting the night air drift in through the screen door. The house felt lighter somehow, still lonely. Yes, but honest again. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel like I had to look over my shoulder. The rain came without warning that night, not the kind that tiptoes in with a drizzle, but the kind that pounds the roof like an old drummer testing his rhythm, the kind that fills every crack, every silence. I was sitting by the window, a lamp glowing low beside me, watching the drops race down the glass. I'd been writing in my journal again, something about peace, or maybe just trying to convince myself I'd found it. Then I heard the sound of tires crunching on wet gravel. For a moment, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks. But then I saw headlights through the curtain stopping at the end of my driveway. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting the way old bones do. Outside, the rain was relentless, turning the yard into a sheet of silver. And there he was, Michael stepping out of the car without an umbrella, his shirt plastered to his skin, hair dripping into his eyes. He didn't walk, he stumbled. By the time he reached the porch, he was shaking from cold, from nerves, maybe from everything in between. He stopped at the bottom of the steps, his chest rising and falling hard, and then to my shock he dropped to his knees. "Dad," he called out, voice breaking under the rain, "I can't live with it anymore." I froze. The sound of those words was heavier than the thunder that followed. When I opened the door, the warm light from the living room spilled onto the porch. He looked up, his face streaked with water and tears, both indistinguishable under the storm. "I was a coward," he said, barely audible. "I let her do it. I told myself it wasn't my fault, but it was. I just didn't want to see it. I didn't want to see you." The rain drummed harder, like nature itself was holding its breath. I stepped closer, water soaking into my slippers, the chill creeping up my legs. I wanted to speak, but nothing came. I had thought of this moment so many times, imagined what I would say if he ever came back. But when it finally happened, all the words seemed too small for what stood between us. "Michael," I said finally, my voice shaking, "you don't have to kneel." He shook his head violently. "No, I do. I need to. I need you to know that I see it now. Everything. What she did. What I allowed. You didn't deserve any of it." His shoulders trembled as he cried, the rain pooling around him. For all his success, all his confidence, he looked like a little boy again, the same boy I'd once carried on my shoulders through this very yard, long before life made us strangers. I knelt down beside him. The wood of the porch was slick and cold, but I didn't care. "Son," I said, my hand finding his shoulder, "truth never comes late. It just waits for us to be brave enough to face it." He looked up, eyes wide, as if those words had reached a place no apology ever could. For a moment, we stayed like that, father and son, two silhouettes in the rain, bound not by guilt anymore but by something stronger, the courage to face what was broken. Then I pulled him into my arms. The smell of rain, earth, and salt filled the air. It wasn't forgiveness spoken, it was forgiveness lived. When we finally went inside, the warmth hit us like a gentle wave. I handed him a towel, and he laughed weakly through his tears. "Mom would have said we're both fools standing out there like that," he muttered. "She'd be right," I said, smiling faintly. "But she'd also say it's about time." He nodded, sitting down by the fireplace. The flames flickered softly, painting the room in gold and orange. I poured us each a cup of coffee, though his hands shook too much to hold it steady. "Dad," he said after a while, "I've been thinking about what you told me. About helping people like you, people who got taken advantage of." I raised an eyebrow. "Go on." He took a deep breath. "Let's start something. A foundation, maybe. A place where seniors can get real help before it's too late." A slow warmth spread through me, deeper than the coffee. "You really mean that?" "Yes," he said firmly. "We'll call it Grace Hand's Foundation." The name hung in the air, soft, simple, and right. We stayed up late that night, talking like we hadn't in years. The rain outside softened to a steady murmur, and the fire had burned low, leaving only embers that glowed like old memories, refusing to die out completely. Michael sat forward, elbows on his knees, staring into the flames. "I don't want Grace Hands to just be a name," he said. "I want it to mean something real: protection, real awareness. People like you shouldn't have to fight alone." I nodded slowly. "Then we'll make it real. But it won't be easy." He smiled faintly. Neither was forgiveness. That line lingered between us heavier than it sounded. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The storm had ended, but the house still carried that quiet hum that comes after something big has passed, not silence, but relief. Michael finally looked up. "You know, I used to think you were unshakable," he said, "that nothing could get to you." "Age doesn't make you immune," I told him. "It just teaches you which battles are worth the bruises." He nodded, thoughtful. "Then this foundation, it'll be our battle worth fighting." We talked about everything, the logistics, the lawyers, the outreach, but somewhere between planning and dreaming, laughter crept back in. It started small, cautious, but then it grew, the kind of laughter that carries healing in its rhythm. By the time we finally stood up, the clock had slipped past midnight. The air smelled clean, that earthy scent Texas always leaves behind after rain. Michael walked to the window and looked out at the drenched garden. "Mom would have loved this," he said softly. "Helping others, doing something with heart." "She'd have called it redemption," I said. He turned toward me. "For who?" "For both of us." He smiled, a real one this time. The boy I used to know was somewhere in that smile. Older now, tempered by loss but still shining through. When he left that night, the sky was beginning to clear. The moon peeked out from behind the clouds, silver light washing over the wet earth. I watched him drive away, headlights fading down the long road, until there was only darkness and peace. In the weeks that followed, we built Grace Hand's foundation from the ground up. Amelia helped us file the paperwork, Robert handled the finances, and Michael threw himself into every detail with the kind of purpose I hadn't seen in him since he was a teenager building his first computer at the kitchen table. Calls started coming in quiet. Trembling voices from across Texas, elderly men and women who had been tricked, pressured, or silenced by their own blood. Every story hurt, but everyone also reminded me why we'd started. A year later, they gave me an award, Texas Man of the Year. I remember standing on the stage, the applause washing over me like another kind of rain. Michael stood in the crowd, clapping with tears in his eyes. When they handed me the plaque, I didn't make a speech. I just said, "Justice isn't a trophy. It's the right thing finally done." That night, I drove home alone, just as I had driven so many nights before. But this time, the silence in the car didn't feel empty. It felt earned. When I got back, I sat on the porch with my journal and a cup of tea. The roses my wife planted were in bloom again, glowing faintly under the porch light. I opened to the last page and wrote, "The greatest victory of a father isn't in winning a case, but in teaching his son to live with integrity." If you enjoyed this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box to the right.